Welcome back to 50 Days to Rebuild, the series where I do 50 minutes of exercise and read 50 pages of a physio book in a day. This is day 16. Okay, so I've really been prioritizing trying to improve and work on all of the McGill type exercises, which really goes in line with the fact that I'm reading him currently. But jumping into those exercises, so we'll start with the side plank. So as of the past few days, when I'm standing at my desk, I've been feeling like my endurance in my QLs, so my quadratus lumborums, is lower in the just last week or two. To some extent, it's been a lot of the time that I've been doing this challenge for. And in hindsight, I'm thinking that it's because of how I've changed my cueing. This whole upward rotation cue I think is correct, but I stopped doing any of the scoop sort of cue that I was doing previously that was really helpful to get my lats engaged. Yesterday, my QLs just felt so tired. I was just like, okay, I'll jump into a side plank, and I did the activation like normal, like the actual old scoop I used to do, because it just wasn't feeling like enough support to really get the lats going. And I did the scoop, but then I did this upward rotation, sort of abducting and pushing away, and it was like, oh, that's perfect, that's it. Look, I often think this, and then I get a correction to form over time. Is it perfection? Probably not, but I think it's a much better approach. We then apply that to the bird dog, similar success. So sometimes the bird dog feels great, sometimes it feels okay. Doing this yesterday and then doing it today as well felt really good. Getting the scoop and then pushing around the body as I have been in the last weeks. That combination of cueing seems to be the thing that works best. I also worked on changing the order that I was doing some of these exercises in, so I'm trying to be better about making sure that I do the cat-cow first to try and reduce the height between the discs of my spine in the morning, because after you sleep there's decompression, you're actually taller, and I sometimes forget to do this first, so making sure I'm on top of that first, but also trying to get the glute activation prior to the hip hinge, because when you look at it, it's essentially the end part of that is the glute bridge. So worked on that first. Following on from the difficulties activating yesterday, I had similar difficulties, and then really the issue seems that I can't activate my quads. So I was laying there, I braced, I squeezed my glutes, and I was like, okay, what if I just try and do essentially a leg extension right now? What happens? And what I noticed was it was really hard. I couldn't feel the quads, and I felt a tension in my hip flexors. So I took that information, I was like, stuff it, let's try and massage what feels tight in this restriction. Try to get into the psoas, because it's the main hip flexor that crosses two joints. So in terms of low back, it's really the main thing to focus on. Obviously the iliacus is still important here, but that's what I tried to target anyway. What I noticed after doing the massage though was I came back to do this activation and then do the leg extension, and instantly I'm like, wow, my quads are firing. Try to do the glute bridge, still hard, still a lot of focus required. And it took a couple rounds to be like, okay, I can get that. I'm not getting massive activation in my hamstrings, but it was good. And I was getting more of a quad and a glute activation, which I was really happy with. With the hinge, I had a bit of difficulty with it. I think I'm getting a little better getting back to that neutral position, but it didn't feel like I could really get back far enough in this whole braced setup, and I kind of just went about it relaxed and was like, what just happens if I naturally sort of fall back into this hinge? I sort of watched myself in the video, I'm like, oh, it's that's great, I'm just not braced. So I sort of was like, okay, that's what the movement should feel like, now it should feel like that with brace. So I did the brace, added that on, and then I added on the glute squeeze, harder each time I've added this extra levels of tension, but all of a sudden I was like, okay, that's more of the range I want, that's more of the lumbar lordosis. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. Jumping into what I learned today, and we are rapidly closing in on finishing Ultimate Back Health and Fitness by Stuart McGill. I really need to figure out what I'm going to read next. The first thing that I found really intriguing was that he said when we're doing motor control work, because it's so focus intensive, it's really important to be focus intensive, to not have music or any distractions. And I always work out with music. I have, at least recently, for quite a long time. And I thought that was a good way to motivate myself, but admittedly when I read this, I kind of didn't want to process it. I was like, move on, but I'll try without, I just got to take that information as it is. Don't want to ignore anything. So yeah, we'll see if that helps. On this idea of struggling to find neutral, he said that if you palpate your extensor muscles and then sort of work through different flexion and extension ranges, you'll feel a point where they kind of turn off, and that's more of your neutral point. He also said that if you're sort of struggling with the upper portion to try and basically take your fist into external rotation and then relax your arms, and that might sort of get your chest into the right spot. I've tried this before with Kelly's thread. I'm not sure if that really helps me the most, but I can see what he means. Like, it does raise your chest, but then I feel like when I relax it, it just drops again. But yeah, I think that palpating the extensors might be a helpful way to go. On that form cueing, I'm a little confused by one portion. So one part said that we need to elevate the rib cage as we're sort of lifting up. And then the subsequent section said we need to lock the rib cage down to the pelvis. I don't think that's contradictory. I think I'm understanding what they're saying, but it is a little confusing. I think, much like what I do, which is I try and get the ribs down and then elevate the sternum, which was like a powerlifter cue was the sternum one, but then anybody that has like a hinge should really try and keep the ribs down, like myself. I think that's what they're sort of saying, like lock it down so they move in unison, but then try and elevate everything up so we get a bit of extension and drive. Not 100%, it is a bit confusing, but I think that might be what they're getting at. Following on to this motor control idea, he actually recommended drawing the movement and even drawing like certain principles like center of gravity and things like that, which I found interesting. He said that way you can sort of, if you were external, like you're a consultant, you could get an idea of what the athlete sort of understands of the movement. I'm not sure if it'll help on my own or not, but it might help to sort of compare or even just give me a better like internal understanding of what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to represent. The other thing he said was that eventually you want to get to a point where you're almost practicing the movement without actually moving, like you're just really running through the imagery of it, and that in people that are really like good athletes, like in their glutes for example, like when they get like an EMG on them, they can actually get like the tiniest bit of activation in their glutes, even though they haven't like started the squeeze, which is kind of cool. To some extent, I think he kind of put to bed, well not put to bed, but just really explained this idea of what he actually thinks about spine motion. Like he explicitly said, in some people who have backs that just won't heal, sometimes a bit of spine motion is required. And there's also some people who are so stable, they actually don't need more stability, they do need more mobility. I know, I've always known him as a it depends guy, like everything is to do with the fact that people are individuals, which is nice to hear. Do I think he would support a Jefferson curl? Still probably not, would be my guess. But this was nice to hear. It's like, hey, maybe that tissue does still need movement to heal that particular person. And also, maybe it doesn't. So yeah, it was an interesting give or take. Also, this weird hip hinge thing I've been moving through, apparently this actually does fall under like the McGill method. I think I read it in either Your Spine, Your Yoga or Anatomy Trains, it was one of the two. But maybe they also got it from him. So he actually does talk about this, which I haven't seen before in his other books, and maybe I just glanced over it. But he also talks about progressions, which is cool. So getting a bar on the back and having a a band around the hips, and then also like I think he called it a stop stand position or something like that. It's sort of like a basketball position. It's like hinged in standing, only like 45 degrees, and then come back to standing as some progressions to work through. So I think I'm going to try all of those out as this one starts getting a bit better with this like hip hinge exercise I've been doing. I should also start reintegrating the clamshell stuff. I did try that previously, sort of forgot about it because I wasn't having success with the glute max work of the glute bridge, which I thought that was sort of the point of the clamshell, was to get the medius to then get it integrated during the glute bridge, which is more of a maximus exercise. I think I might be wrong on that. So he's saying do clamshell, then like a lateral abduction while you're sort of side lying, and then putting weight on that eventually, and then doing monster band walks, and then I believe doing suitcase carries after that. I don't think I'm going to jump to the end part of that just yet, but might come back to that earlier stage and see if I can get some better glute firing, because I am really excited at the prospect of being able to do a bloody hip hinge. He also showed a pretty good sequence for rolling. So the sort of like side plank roll that I've done previously, I'm going to try and reintegrate. But also building up to some certain rolls on like a bench, and then eventually getting to some pretty hectic sort of movements that, to be honest, had a lot of cervical flexion in them, and then eventually like a Turkish get up. So yeah, kind of keen to sort of integrate some of that in. The last thing on just like a standing form I wanted to touch on was he talked about the lats depressing the shoulder girdle. And I wanted to discuss that wording very quickly, the girdle. So the thing that I have heard is that depressing the shoulder blades can be negative because we can get some pinching of the nerves under the clavicle. And this is why I don't like the down and back cue, for example. It's part of the reason when we're doing like a bench. But shoulder girdle and the fact that the lats don't necessarily insert onto the shoulder blade, like sometimes they do onto the inferior angle, but not always. So like, are we just sort of pulling down the musculature that brings that along for the ride, so we're not actually depressing the shoulder blade, it's more like we're depressing the whole girdle with it? I'm not sure. That's still something I'm trying to wrap my head around. I can see why lat activation is important, but then I get confused as like, how are we activating the lats when we're trying to go overhead when it's depressing, but we're trying to go up? I don't know, it's a bit of a mess, but it is nice to know they are meant to be active because I always feel much more stable when they're active. Okay, and quickly running through a few extra tips he had about the McGill Big 3 that I'm going to try and integrate. So with the side plank, just looking at the picture, I come up way too high. I like the feeling of activation I get when I come up that high, but it's also not as neutral of a position. Like, I'm getting some lateral flexion when I do that. No wonder it's activating more. So I shouldn't be doing that. He also said when you're doing the side plank roll, that you should hold each of the positions for like 10 seconds minimum, which is interesting. Like, I was told previously by a chiro that studied under McGill, like, there's no point holding for like over like a few seconds. But it sounds like for the side plank at least, like, it actually is worthwhile. With the bird dog, he said your shoulders do actually want to abduct a little bit. I don't think they want to abduct as much as mine were previously. But yeah, apparently sort of when you're sweeping the arm in, sort of bringing it across medially, and then abducting it out is the right approach. Also, the end result that we would ideally chase, even if it's not exactly where we start, is both limbs parallel to the ground. So that's a good goal to work towards. I was always told, like, kick down and back. I think it's because people often kick way too high up. But yeah, the goal is eventually horizontal. And with the curl up, which is something recently I've had some doubts about, he said, again, make sure you push the tongue into the roof of your mouth, which I'm not sure if I've been doing or not, and clench the teeth a little bit, just so they're touching. And try and lock the neck and head down on the rib cage, and then try and pivot about the sternum or like mid-thoracic. So the mid-thoracic thing I try and do, but I think I've been not too good about locking the neck down, so I'm going to try and do that again. He also said a lot of these things can be progressed, like the bird dog, for example, with weight, like ankle and wrist weights, and also ballistic movement. There were also a host of active stretches shown, like for example, like a pancake stretch, which was cool to see. Like, I'm going to try a few of them, I think. Because I've been trying to find some of the stretches that won't hurt my spine. This was his concept of active flexibility. It really seems like we have a neutral spine. Looks like the glutes are engaged, for example, in this like pancake. We're never really like taking the spine through motion. Are some stretches to take the spine through motion still good? Maybe. Again, he might say it depends on the athlete or the client. But I might try some of these first. Take a more conservative approach. And finally, with the cat-cow or cat-camel, I've been unsure if I was meant to be bracing while I was doing it. Yes, you should have a light brace. It should be like a nice, I guess like each segment, like a nice integration, like each segment is moving in an integrated way. That wraps it up for day 16. Hopefully I can figure out which book to read next before I finish this book, which is rapidly encroaching. And yeah, thanks again for watching and have a good day.